the same thing at altitude, but the problem was doing it on takeoff. When you're at low level, if you roll it over and the wing hits the water, you're going to crash. You don't want it to happen that way. You want to be able to stop it.
And so this expertise led to...
We were at 5,000 feet when I told him we were going to practice this, and he was a little bit leery because he had heard the rumors. And I said, well, there's no problem here. We've got a lot of altitude beneath us, and I can regain control even if we lose control at first. We've got a lot of altitude to regain control. So he eventually agreed that he would turn off the engine while I was looking out the window so I couldn't see which one he was turning off. So I'd have to feel it with my rudders and correct it.
Wow.
So he cut off the right engine, and I felt the actual movement in the rudders before I ever heard the fact that the engine was dying. And I could feel it. So I started pressing on the rudder, and as the airplane was trying to turn, I eventually had full rudder pressed in, and we had lost 1,000 feet and were at a vertical turn before I regained control. So that's what happens to the guys that didn't get the full control immediately. They got that way when they were right over the water, and the wing, whichever one it was, would drag in the water and they'd crash.
Awful.
So we went back up to 5,000 feet. We had lost 1,000 feet in that maneuver. So we got back up there and we had the airplane level again. And I said, okay, let's do it again. And this time I kept the airplane it got no more than a 45-degree angle before I got it straightened out. And we kept practicing that until we stayed level. When it quit, I could keep the airplane level.
So you wouldn't know which engine he was going to shut
down?
No,
I didn't know.
You created your own training
simulator. I wanted to be
simulator.
Looking out the window because I wanted this to be a surprise to me.
So a simulator in the real world.
Yeah.
That's a lot of ingenuity there.
Well,
that's fascinating.
Well, it seemed pretty simple to me. The fact was that the engines aren't going to quit the way that guy was telling me to do it. And I had to learn the right way.
Right.
And the right way was difficult to learn. You had to be taught. I never lost a pilot. After I became an instructor, which was let's see, that was in November that I was doing this, and late in December I was made an instructor. I had enough time and enough practice by then that they made me an instructor, and I never lost a pilot that was one of my students because I taught him how to do that immediately. The first thing I taught him was that. I didn't care whether he knew how to recover from a stall or anything else. I wanted him to know that when he was taking off, he had to be ready to level that airplane if he lost an engine.
Well, that was a lucky co-pilot trainee that day.
Yep.
He got the best training the Air Force had, and it wasn't traditional on the books.
He learned first off, didn't he?
So talk about how that led to the congressional review of the B-26.
Well, that was some time later. After training there as an instructor for a couple of months, it was in February, I think, of, 43, that our unit, the 391st Bomb Unit, was formed from that group that was in training there at MacDill Field. Prior to that time, I had seen the 386 and the 387th Bomb Group formed from the training unit of the guys that were there ahead of me. Now it's my turn, and we formed the 391st Bomb Group in February, and shortly after forming there, we transferred to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, for our final training to get through our bombing and our gunnery practice so that we were ready to go overseas. And what was I supposed to be telling you about now?
Oh, well, you're
Oh, we were scheduled to complete our training and go overseas on June 23rd of 1943. When the time came, we left Myrtle Beach, but we didn't go overseas. We were sent down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we didn't understand why. But our whole transfer overseas was canceled at that time, and later we learned that it was because Senator Truman, who was on the military committee, had started an investigation of the B-26 with an attempt to stop production of it because so many people had originally been killed in learning to fly it. Well, we had stopped that now. There were no more guys being killed because not only did I train my students, but I got all the other guys that were instructors to try this maneuver as I did it, and they all agreed that that was the way to stop the problem so that nobody was getting killed on takeoff anymore.
Yeah.
But Truman had started this investigation, and he was going to doggone well get our airplane canceled.
Mid-war.
And that was why we were not going overseas. But something did become apparent later. From Fort Knox, we were detailed to fly to several other Army Air Corps airfields and put on flight demonstrations of bombing. And what we discovered by accident was that while we were doing this, somewhere around us, there were senators sitting in bleachers watching us with binoculars. They were sitting far enough away that they could watch us fly, and they were providing proof to them that we were okay as an airplane. We were all there.
As a result of your training.
We were all in formation, flying, dropping bombs, doing what we were supposed to do, and we were okay.
Was this a direct result of your training? Were you able to demonstrate this?
Well, I did to our group. I don't know how far it got to other groups because there were other places that were training B-26s, but I assume that they must have learned it somewhere else too because the whole thing blew up in, in Truman's face, I guess, because they did not cancel the aircraft. They started building them again, and we got new airplanes, and we went overseas, and later on they actually built more of them, though they did delay the building of them to some degree because our replacements weren't ready for us when we were ready to come home after we were overseas.
Wow. So we talked about Pearl Harbor. Now the war is in full swing. I'm curious about some of the action events. What was the most precarious moment in the sky? What altitude? Was it machine gun fire? Was it clouds? What was the most death-defying stunt?
Well, I would think to most of us, it was the accuracy of the German anti-aircraft artillery.
Okay.
The flak.
The flak cannons?
Because we never lost an airplane to fighters.
You never lost a B-26 to a fighter pilot?
Never did.
Because of your speed and...
That was one of the things they... if we got scared of them, we could start diving and run them.
That's incredible. So the B-26 was a bad boy.
It was a good boy.
Yeah.
I loved the airplane. It was really a great flying airplane if you got over that characteristic of rolling on the... Actually, I never had a failure on takeoff, except there is a different problem that most people never even talk about. That was the first airplane to have electric propellers. Now our propellers were, we could change the angle of the propeller blades. Uh, Ours was a four-bladed propeller built by Curtiss, which was the company designed and built the propeller for this airplane. It was also the same propeller that was on the P-47 fighter, the same engine and same airplane. I mean, the same propeller, not the same propeller and engine combination was on the P-47 fighter airplane. So we had two of them on the B-26.
Was it ever more sensible to slow down and gun down fighters, or did it always make the most sense just to flee?
Oh,
Because you had three
get
gunners,
away.
right? Three
Get
turrets.
We couldn't outgun them. They could maneuver around. They could throw off our fighter or our gunners, and my tail gunner was probably one of the best in our unit. He was an excellent gunner. When he shot at the tow targets that we practiced on, he riddled them. But a lot of the gunners could not get used to controlling that turret, and they couldn't hit it if they had another belt or two of ammunition.
These were twin barrels, right?
Yeah, twin 50s.
Twin 50s. This is
and
a loud
turret
place to
in
be.
The tail, and we had a twin turret, top turret gunner. My top turret gunner was the radio operator, or no, he was the crew chief, and the crew chief was pretty good too, but my tail gunner was really an excellent gunner. However, I lost him midway through our flying because he was flying on a mission with the squadron commander. He was I wasn't flying that day, and he volunteered for an extra flight so that he could keep up with me, because as an instructor, I was flying extra missions as an instructor, getting the way we would do an instrument check. A guy that was due for one they'd schedule me to fly with him on a regular mission. And I'd check him out on instrument flying on a regular mission. So then I was credited with another mission that my crew wasn't credited for. So they all would volunteer to fly with other guys if we weren't scheduled that day. So they would get as many missions as I had. That way we'd all finish at the same time and go home together. And he was flying with the squadron commander, and they got shot down. And they were shot down by flak.
By those flak cannons. Over what territory?
Over it was between, I can't think of the names of the cities on the coast of France. It was between there when they were entering the coast. They got hit, and they were set on fire, and they had to bail out. And everybody saw my tail gunner bail out, and they saw him take off his parachute and start running away. Well, the briefings that we got were, if you get shot down, disperse your crew so the Germans can't catch you all at once. They've got to separate their forces if you're all running in different directions.
Okay, so this
this gang stayed together, and my tail gunner was the only one who ran away separately. They saw him go, and we never heard from him again.
Oh man! So he was
from South Bend, Indiana.
What was his name?
Lloyd Alexander was his name.
Lloyd Alexander from South Bend was a sharpshooter tail gunner.
Yep, he was. He was real sharpshooter. Anyhow, later he was found. He lived. He didn't get lost, but he didn't go with the group, and they all walked together and got back to the American forces together and were brought back together. And he was off with a French underground.
Wow.
They got him and took him under their care, and they could have got him back, but he met a gal there and got married.
To a French girl?
He married a French girl there that he met in
neat.
the underground. He stayed and fought with the underground for a while.
So did she come back to the States, I'm assuming?
I have no idea. I never saw them again. Never saw them again. He was still there, and I think it was one of our group went back overseas and on some gathering that was at the invasion beaches, and they saw him there.
Wow.
And he was married. And he stayed there, and as far as I know, he stayed there forever. Never did come back.
So how close were you to his plane when it got hit?
Oh, I wasn't even flying that day.
Okay.
I wouldn't have been. If I'd have been flying, he'd have been with me.
Okay.
But he was flying with the commander because he was getting an extra mission, so because I was getting ahead of him in missions.
So everybody had a bailout and a parachute. So there were no casualties. Was it a safe exit from the B-26?
Oh, yeah, they all got out.
Okay.
There was no question. The airplane was on fire, so they had to abandon it. But they all got out.
Okay.
The navigator that day was a very good friend of mine. He was the navigator for one of my best classmates in flight school. He and I graduated together and got together in the same squadron to go overseas. And we were really great buddies from flight school and all the way through the war.
Yeah.
He even came and stayed to me on his honeymoon. My wife and I had, after we got back, had taken a place on the beach at it was west of Panama City, Florida. We were stationed at that base at Panama City, and we got a house on the beach out there. And when Ole got married, he came and stayed with us in our beach house on his honeymoon.
Wow.
And we were laying there on the beach, out in front of the cottage one day when we heard this buzz bomb coming over, and we thought, "What the heck? Have the Germans got new long-range ones?" We rolled under the porch and watched this thing fly by, and it was one of those German buzz bombs that we had captured, and they were testing them out over the Gulf.
Oh, wow.
And we thought the Germans had some long-range ones, and they were shooting them at us because we had heard a lot of those over there during the war.
So what were your primary targets? Did you support the Navy? Did you support...
Well, it's pretty obvious to us after a while. It wasn't at first, but we were part of that big deception program
Fortitude?
that the whole force, all the forces were trying to deceive Hitler on the place of our invasion of France. This was, of course, before D-Day. And so all of our targets were at some place other than the place we were going to invade. And we concentrated more in the Pas-de-Calais area of France because there were lots of railroad places we could bomb there, and a lot of bridges. And
did you have a good range? How far could you go from
from
England?
We could fly for, well, it took us 10 hours to get to England from Africa. So we could fly a long time, but we never did. Most of our missions were no more than 3.5 or 4 hours.
Was the B-26 considered expendable? If they had to pick something to do a risky bombing mission,
well,
who would they pick?
I don't know about that, but I do know that they told the Germans we were coming once. It was early on in April. We were told that they had told the Germans. I don't know this to be fact, but we were told that. In April of 1943, long before we were over there, they had scheduled a B-26 bombing mission at Imoyden, Holland, which is a submarine station. And they sent 11 airplanes to take off to go over there at low level. They were flying at 500 feet over the channel.
And take out the
And
submarine?
one of the aircraft lost an engine. So instead of staying at 500 feet, he zoomed up in the air. And when he did that, of course, then they could see him coming. So they were ready for him when they got there. They shot the 10 that went over there, all got shot down.
Oh, no.
With ground fire, yeah.
So there was 11 B-26s?
There were 11 that started. The one lost his engine. He turned around and went home, and the 10 that got over there got shot down.
The mission was to take out the submarine base?
Yeah.
There
were sub-pens there that they called them, the places that they docked.
Just a small mission among a
Yeah.
great operation.
It was very, very concentrated area. But they shot them all down. So exactly 1 year later, when we were there, this is now December of 40 or April of 44, they told us that they were going to tell them to get the civilians out of town because we're going to demolish that place. That's what they told us that they told them. And they had 600 of us plus fighters all attacking at the same time. There was just one, we flew in trail, every guy bombing in trail, just 600 guys going over dropping bombs on that place. We're getting even with them for shooting down our 10 airplanes.
That's Holland.
That's in Holland.
Wow.
Imoyden, Holland.
Were you part of Dresden, or did you have friends at Dresden?
No.
I heard that became a propaganda nightmare for the Allies.
Wasn't even involved.
Okay.
But that was the only time we bombed in Holland that I can remember. Whoops, I pushed that out of the way.
So
Holland. I got it back all right?
Yeah, that's good.
Well,
why don't we take a break here? We're at 53 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead.